So in the last video of this, I picked this computer up right over here. It was on the Facebook Marketplace. They wanted initially, I believe it was 50 bucks. I negotiated a price and I just offered it 20. If they would have told me 40, I still would have bought it. So sometimes negotiate a price, you might get the price you want. So I offered 20. It was sight unseen. They didn't know nothing about it. I didn't know nothing about it. I really wasn't even sure what kind of motherboard or anything it had in it. And we wound up scoring huge on it. So I got it for $20. I had to drive an hour away, and I'll post a link to that video in case you guys want to watch it. Brought it back to the house, inspected it, and we turned out that I had an i7-3770K, 3 1TB hard drives, and a power supply. Well, it's been a couple of weeks since I bought this, and this has kind of been sitting around the garage. I know, pretty bad. And life happens. And I had to use the power supply for another build, and what happened with the power supply was that it wasn't good. I always recommend, guys, if you're gonna buy a used power supply, make sure you have a power supply tester. I keep one handy. I don't know where it's at, so I guess it's not too handy, but I keep a power supply tester handy at like $20 on Amazon. You plug it in, you give it power, and it'll tell you if you have a fault with one of the rails, voltage, all that good stuff and everything like that. And it turned out that power supply did have a fault. It was a Thermaltake power supply. I forget what model it was, but before you get any used power supply and you plug it into your rig or build that you're gonna do, test it. That had a fault, and who knows what that fault could have led to, a short or burnt out component. But anyways, we were able to keep from damaging our components. I had 3 1TB, 2 blues and 1 black from Western Digital. As you can see, I've already utilized them and everything. So I figured before I end up dissecting this thing and getting into it, let's go ahead and do the build. So I've already gone and I've tested this, and I mean, you guys have seen a lot of testing videos and everything. We just plugged it in on the bench real quick, and the i7-3770K works perfectly and flawlessly. So let's talk about the build and what we're gonna do. I'm actually gonna keep this case. I think it's a really cool case, and I got a customer lined up for it. So we're gonna go down that route. The one thing that's missing in the front is all these covers, which is quite agitating over here because, you know, you don't want to open this up. Yes, this hides it, but still you open it up and it's like, you know. And if this is for a kid's build, they could go ahead and put all their toys and Legos in here, and that's definitely not good. So yeah, we're not going to do that. I actually got this mesh over here, and we're going to be working on it. And I'm going to cut this mesh, put it in the inside, and I kind of like the look of it. So I think that's going to give it a nice look and also protect it from little rugrats deciding to put things in there, or maybe critters. I don't know. Hopefully you ain't got no critters up in there. So I'm gonna do that. It has this fan ecosystem, which I'm not a fan of, which, by the way, this is an NZXT case, in case you're wondering what type it is. The model, I'll post it somewhere if I can figure out what model it is. And it has this fan ecosystem. I went ahead and tried it, and it doesn't work. So, and they're only 3 pins, which is fine considering that you could adjust the fan cooling on it. But I'm going to go with a different fan configuration for it. We're actually going to talk about what we're going to be doing with it. So this is coming out, and what I went ahead and did, thanks to my brother, if he watches the video, appreciate you, bro, love you, bro. He went ahead and made a mesh for me and just went ahead and mounted that up. So huge props to my bro for going ahead and taking the initiative on that. So now for our components, huge shout out to Tech215. I'll post a link to his channel. I ran out of DDR3 memory. I know, DDR3 computers have been selling left and right, and I've just ran out of them. And I was talking to him about the build, and he said, bro, I got you. And he hooked me up with 2 8GB sticks of DDR3 memory for this build. So definitely happy with that. Huge shout out to him. Definitely check his channel. His channel is phenomenal. Not only did he hook us up with that, but he also did hook us up with the 240 SSD that we need for this build. So 240 SSD, 16 gigs of DDR3, a 1TB hard drive, awesome. Our power supply, Corsair 750 watt TX. This was in another computer that we salvaged out of. Good power supply. It's been through the tester, works phenomenal. So no issues with that power supply. Our graphics cards. This is what actually came up pretty cool last minute, and gotta love the eBay sometimes. Browsing around for graphics cards, you know prices are ridiculous. I got this one for 30 bucks, but there's a catch to it, and this is what kind of leads me into my whole build for this computer. So what I have is a Radeon HD 7970 with 3 gigs of DDR5 memory and it's water cooled, and it comes with this EK water block, which I think is a pretty cool block. And this thing is freaking heavy. It's the EKFC 7970, and I think this is going to be a great budget build for 1080p gaming for the customer that's getting this build. So yeah, awesome graphics cards. And I paid $30 for it. Why did I pay $30? Well, nobody wants to buy a graphics card with an older graphics card, that is, with a water cooler. But luckily for me, I keep things lying around, and I got some ideas percolating. So let's talk about what are we going to do for this. So to cool this and also cool our CPU, we're going to go with my Chinese water cooling kit. I'll post a link to this video about 2 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, about the start of this channel. I bought this for like $100. It worked pretty decent. The pump that it came with was bad, but they gave me my money back, and the money was actually used to buy a better pump for it. And the system performed flawless, but if you watched one of my videos, you realize I had made a huge mistake and my temperatures weren't where they needed to be. So this is the pump that we're going to be using. It's a freeze mod pump. It actually works pretty good. I actually like this pump. I'm very impressed of how it got the job done. Molex, yuck, but it does have the 4 pins, so you can plug it into the fan header for that, so you can have speed control of the pump. Well, not speed control, but you can plug it into the pump header on it. Our reservoir, which this is what we're going to use to go right over here, screw it in. As far as the specifics of this, it's a Chinese water cooling kit on eBay. I paid $100 for it, so yeah, that's what it is. This is our radiator that we're going to be using, no name, and our no name, no frills, no brand fans. So they worked actually pretty decent, and we're not going to use these fans. We're going to be using a different fan kit that I have, so we can have a little RGB action going in here. Go figure, who would want that, right? Hardware, whatever, tubing, and not only that, but because we're going to be adding a water cooler, we're going to be adding a GPU water block to it. Had to go to the whole Home Depot and Lowe's and get me some hoses for it. So yeah, it's inner diameter 3/8, outer diameter 1/2 inch, 10 foot. So we should be able to cut and splice and use what we need to use on that. Had to get some extra fittings for the water cooler. These are, I don't know, they were on Amazon, so I'll post a link to that in case you guys are interested. And if you remember, like I said, if you watched that video where I was talking about using a CPU cooler and all that good stuff, I forgot to peel the plastic off of this. We ran this for a while. Computer never heated, but then again, it was like always 30 degrees in my garage. But yeah, make sure you peel the plastic off of it. That definitely something that needs to be done. But I decided I wanted to go with a different block, something a little nicer in my opinion, so I went with this black one. It's from China, also got on eBay, no frills, all that good stuff like that. And that's pretty much everything that we're going to be using for this kit. For the water, distilled water, and if you're going to be using this kit long term, get a little biocide over here. I got this from Primo Chill. I use this in all my water cooling loops, and I've never had a computer come back with squirrely, suspicious things growing in it. So, and for our fans, up here fans, I've used these a bunch. I like them. They work pretty decent. Good amount of airflow, and for the price, you get 5 for like, I think 30 bucks on it. So yeah, of course they're proprietary, and the fact that you have to use their dedicated hub to it. But the real thing that really sold me on this, which makes me want to buy them, is that SATA power. A lot of these cheap fans that you get for like $4 or $5 for a cheap price, they're Molex. This is SATA, so yeah, this definitely is good enough for going to town with this computer. So that's what we're gonna be doing. That's our build. So let's switch over to, well, this is the bench. Let's switch over to the construction bench. Let's start cutting some metal. Let's do a little montage, and we'll see how this computer rolls. So like I talked about in the beginning of the video, I really need to put something over here, and that's just matter of preference. Do I have to? No, but I think if we put something in there, it might look a little cooler, and then like I said, nobody has to worry about popping things in there. So I had this lying around, and this is just kind of a mesh grate over here. And what I'm thinking is, and I went ahead and marked it, it's just we're going to go right over here. And you kind of see these holes right there. Well, the little rivets right about over here, here, and here. And that's kind of going to be my good reference right there. And if I cut it right over there, I think we should be able to use some self-tapping metal screws, or whatever you call it, self-tapping metal screws, and that will hold this in place. Or I could just use some, which I might end up entertaining that idea, is I might end up using some hot glue gun just to hold this in place. But before we can do that, we got to cut this. So I have it marked, and I'm going to use my Delta Shopmaster saw. I use this thing a lot for good projects. Pretty good saw. But the only thing about it is that it doesn't move back and forth, so it's going to get a little sketchy trying to cut this. So yeah, make sure you have a blade for cutting metal. I've already installed mine's in, and we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and get to cutting. You know, that actually doesn't look too bad. It looks a lot better than I actually thought it was going to be, so I'm very happy with it. Let's get to cleaning, building, and let's see how it comes out. So this is where we're at with it. Got the water block in. Not too bad, pretty easy to install for the most part. I mean, it works, it'll get the job done. Got my 120 over here, which primary reason for putting this in is because I am using a GPU that's going to be water cooled, and I want to make sure that this 240 doesn't get maxed out on it. So we got a little extra. I had thought about putting something over here, but I think it's going to get a little too complicated. Let me zoom out over here. Looking at it, things are kind of coming together. So just kind of give you an idea of what I'm going to do with the water, the routing. So I'm going to come in from here, go over here, and we're going to be using flex tubing because, yeah, I don't know how to do the other stuff. We're going to be using flex tubing because, well, that's what I have. So I'm going to go from here to here, and then my thought is from here I'm going to go up to this one right over here, and I'm hoping that it clears, and I'll show you why in a second, but I'm pretty sure the line will come out and reach over here, so I don't think we'll have an issue with the fan. And then from the back line over here, I'm actually going to go into the pump right over here. So I'm thinking about actually putting it up here, so running the line right up here, blocking this one off. Yeah, just swapping these two out, and then from here we're going to go into our GPU, and then from our GPU right up into here, and that would actually work and be pretty cool. Now, if it wasn't for the fact that the customer is adamant about having a DVD drive, looking at it, this probably would have looked a lot better being tucked in right over here, and it would have been so much, yeah, it just would have looked cooler. I would have had easier access to the fill port on top, but it's fine, this will work. So I'm gonna end up putting it over here. I'm probably gonna end up, I got one hole over here, and I might end up drilling another hole so I could just mount this securely in. And that should be good. Power supply will go over here. We'll have our SATA and our hard drive over here, and that should be good. The top, now it doesn't have super decent provisions for mounting a water cooler on top, but these holes just happen to line up perfectly. This is secure, this is going nowhere. It threaded in pretty well, so I'm very happy with that. So I'm done for today. It's getting hot in my garage. Tomorrow, which will be in a couple of seconds for you, tomorrow we'll go ahead and start mounting things, running things, and get to the build. So So this is what I call a evolving build, and here's why. So when I started this build, I was kind of going with a junkyard theme, more or less, primarily for the simple fact that I paid like $20 for this CPU, motherboard, case combo with the 1 terabyte hard drives. I was using my custom Chinese water cooling kit that I used a couple of years back and just never really got into it. The graphics card, I got it for 30 bucks, primarily because I guess they couldn't sell it because it had a EK water box cooler on it, and everybody wants a mining card that has an air cooler because it's just easier to deal with that headache. Huge props and shout out to my buddy at Tech2115 for hooking us up with the DDR3 memory, 16 gigs, and the solid state drive. So performance, the i7-3770K performs amazing. I mean, even though as old as it is a great solid 1080p platformer, and this thing performs amazing. I did a video on it just talking about how well it performs in some of the games, and we learned that with this CPU and it paired with a decent graphics card, we're able to get 1080p high performance, 60 plus frames per second, if not a good majority of the games that most people will play with it. My 7970, I'm actually going to do a separate video on that one, just talking about cleaning, dissecting it. So either that video is out or will be out, just depending on the order of this. So definitely linked up for that video. But I will say this 7970 still performs well. 3 gigs of DDR5. Typically I've been running builds with 2 gigs of DDR5, and that 1 extra gig does give you the extra mile for a good budget build. Not to mention the water cooling on it keeps this thing nice and cool, and we'll talk about temperatures in just a second. So temperatures. Now, take this with a grain of salt and just keep this in mind. In my garage right now, it is 91 degrees Fahrenheit. That's right, it is 91 degrees Fahrenheit, and it is hot. I mean, I am just drenched in sweat. I don't know if that comes in on the camera, but I am drenching in sweat, which is one of the reasons why this build took me a couple of days to do instead of 1 day, which a typical build does. But because it's 91 degrees Fahrenheit, there's like literally no airflow in here. Even though we're running full loads, we're running Heaven benchmark, and we're running AIDA 64, which this is an unrealistic real world scenario of how this computer performs as far as temperatures. We're sitting at my CPU. Our max temp at one time was 80 degrees Celsius, and we hover around 75 to say. Our GPU is sitting steady at 62 degrees Celsius. So yes, it does seem like it is a little warm, but keep this in mind, it is 91 degrees in this garage and there's no airflow in this little corner over here. Now earlier, and I kind of lost the footage on it, but I did put this inside the house, stress tested, and did the same thing, and we got temperatures in about 62 to 65 degrees as far as the CPU, and our temperature for our GPU was hovering around 55 degrees Celsius. So yes, this cooling system works phenomenal. Now if you paid attention to the video, you notice that the tubes are swapped out. When I started this thing up, I was not getting flow, and the reason why is I mixed up the inlet and the outlet. So swapping that over, we were able to get water all throughout the loop, bleed it out, and it worked great. And the cool thing is about setting it up this way, I was actually able to run a tube just to fill it up, bleed the system, no issues, runs phenomenal. Overall, I like this thing. This thing works phenomenal. The temps right now are using stock settings, primarily because if I overclock it in my garage right now, because it is so hot and climbing, because now we're at 92 degrees Fahrenheit and it's getting warmer because we're noon, the temperature is kind of getting borderline. When I brought it inside the house, I was able to get this to 4.8 gigahertz stable, and we were able to keep temperatures in the 65 was like the highest it pegged out. But if you're gaming and you're using this thing, the temperatures of course are going to be a bit lower, primarily because AIDA 64 and Heaven, I mean, they stressed the mess out of the video card and the CPU. Not to mention, I'm running them simultaneously. Outside of everything, this build was pretty fun and I did enjoy it. It was a headache trying to mod and retrofit this case and just kind of making everything work, as this case, when it was built, it was not built with water cooling in mind, obviously, but we were able to make it work, and I think it looks phenomenal, and I definitely enjoyed it. So guys, comment down below, let me know your thoughts on this build. Do you guys like it? How'd I do? Opinions, criticisms, thoughts, and everything. I love to hear from it. This is how I learning from you guys and what you guys share with me. So if you like this video, definitely hit the like button, subscribe if you're not, and as always, we'll see what we come up with next.